Listen, if you're trying to break into the cybersecurity industry and you have no idea where to start, how the career path looks, or what things you should really be focused on, you do not want to miss out on this incredible conversation that I have with William Dodgen, who's actually a colleague of mine at DataLocker. He's going to go through some of his tips, his tricks, his backgrounds, how he got into cyber himself, and things that he looks for when he's hiring other people who's going to be a part of his team. So buckle up, strap in, let's go, show the intro. What up, what up? Welcome back to another episode of the Simply Secure podcast. This time I'm joined actually by a colleague of mine, and I'm so excited to have this conversation and have him drop his gems, his knowledge, his information. I referred to him on a couple of different shows, but I want to show him to you guys and cut him loose to you guys so you guys can hear some of his thought process about cybersecurity and this amazing industry that we all operate in. So, William, go ahead, introduce yourself, my man. Let the people know who you are, what you're excited about.
Hi, I'm William Dodgen. I'm a cybersecurity manager here at DataLocker. Um, I'm a huge geek and I love pretty much everything security and information related. So, yeah.
Awesome. So excited to have you here, Will. And he has, just so you guys know, he has one heck of a pickleball game. Okay.
Mm.
So the guy's good. All right. But real quick, William, because I always like to start here, man. How did you get into cyber? Did you just kind of stumble upon it?
Um,
How did that origin story come about?
yeah, I think probably a lot of people have a kind of the same story is that they got into technology young. They were a big geek. They were taking things apart, sometimes putting it back together. Um, really trying to expand their knowledge on the security front. I remember listening to some podcasts when I was just in high school, just getting really started on my technology career, and I really enjoyed following the different tutorials and just learning as much information as I could.
Absolutely. So getting interested in technology, can you dive a little bit deeper onto that? So were you like taking computers apart? Where it was it a I don't know, like, expand on that. What did that look like for you as a kid?
Yeah. So let's see. We probably asked my parents when we had the family computer when I was probably 6 or 7. I probably got in trouble for taking that apart, and I had to fix the CD drive on there on the machine. But I think we got it working, so no big issues there. But
hmm
a lot of different stories like that. So.
That's awesome, man. So curious again. So looking at just your career overall,
Mhm.
right? How did you, I guess, get your foot into the door? Because one of the people that we always like to make sure that we, I guess, they hear an idea of how they can actually break into cyber, right?
Mhm.
So how did you get your foot in the door? What did that look like? Is this your first position? Share with the people a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I really got a big start with my career here at DataLocker. I
hmm
started at the very low level of answering the tech support calls and working my way up from there, working on the engineering side of our different products, um,
hmm
and then learning as much information as I could, so I could transition to cybersecurity and being effective in that position. Starting out in cybersecurity is actually really tough, as you really have to have a really good foundational level on networking, application. Pretty much, you have to know a lot of things about a lot of things
Yep,
to transition to a entry level security position. So it's a lot of work, but it's definitely rewarding.
absolutely. And talk about some of those different areas, right? Like, so you just mentioned that you have to be a part of a lot of things or have knowledge of a lot of different things, right?
Hmm.
I'm just curious from your perspective, how do those things all work together, right? When you talk about network side of things, you talk about some of the other sides of security. How does that come together to culminate this idea of cybersecurity?
Yeah, for sure. Um, Especially if you're trying to break something, if you're trying to do some penetration tests or break into an environment, you're going to want to know how that environment works before you add the security aspect of it.
Mm,
And being able to have that background, have that understanding, um, definitely important. And
absolutely.
whatever tools you're going to use on the security side of things, having that foundation knowledge is definitely key. So.
Perfect. One of the things I love to brag about with when I chat with other security teams, William, is the fact that you make yourself 100% available to the rest of the organization if we have questions about security related stuff, right? um, from your perspective, why is it important to add that value, right? To continue to answer questions, say from myself that may be on the sales side or
Mhm.
the rest of the business, right? That Data Locker is. Why is it important that you make yourself available for us to ask you those questions around cyber?
I think not necessarily just because we're in a cybersecurity platform, but pretty much
Hmm.
all companies nowadays have a strong dependency on their cybersecurity um, posture, and it can make or break a company depending on how they react to that, and um, being able to um, being able to respond and answer the cybersecurity question is going to be beneficial for your customers because that's what they're looking for, and it's going to be beneficial for the company overall as it grows.
Absolutely.
So,
And it's funny because at Data Locker, we sit as a third party vendor in a lot of different, in most people's organizations, right?
mhm.
So how does that, how do you view that vendor relationship, right? Why is it important for us to have our security metrics and some of the things that we put in place? Why is that important when we're having conversation with some of these bigger organizations that are looking to implement Data Locker into their space?
Yeah. So they're actually relying on us to do our part of the job of making sure the product is secure and the platform is secure. And
Mhm.
if we don't hold up that bargain, then they're going to be um, in trouble themselves, right? And so anything that we can do to make it easier for their process, their auditors, um, it's going to help out everyone. So
Absolutely. It's that idea of like putting them at ease, right? Like
yes, very much.
making sure they feel safe in the process of working with Data Locker and the solutions that we have, right?
Exactly.
Perfect. So just curious from a developing standpoint, right? So let's, obviously like you said, you when you got your start here at Data Locker, you've exposed yourself to multiple different areas of the business before you landed into this cybersecurity role that you're in right now. How, I guess not how, but what types of maybe certifications do you feel as though is important to have along the way? Like what things can, if somebody's like trying to again break into the industry or maybe professionals that already have a little bit of maybe security plus
Hmm.
certifications already, with some of the things that you think, hey, this will probably be beneficial for you to get some hands-on learning
Hmm.
and a certification that will help you level up your career and open a new door for you.
Yeah. So you mentioned the Security Plus, which is obviously a great start for
Mhm.
pretty much anyone's trying to break into the field. I my last certificate that I went after was the CISSP, um, and that
Mhm.
one is more of a managerial kind of um, a high level overview of a lot of different topics. And I think
Mhm.
that was beneficial um, as much as changing your mindset of not how to implement these specific security controls, but actually how to um, look at the whole picture. So,
Mhm.
and and there's obviously different directions that you can go in the security field. And
Mhm.
so there's going to be a lot of options available, and I wouldn't overlook getting your foundations as well, looking at doing your networking, having a strong programming background. These are all beneficial things for anyone looking into for the field.
Absolutely. And I want to come back to this point because you said one of the things you had to shift was your mindset,
Hmm.
right? like the mindset behind the managerial side of cyber. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like maybe what was your mindset prior to getting some of these certifications, and then how has that developed to who you are today?
Yeah. So before the CISSP, I was more focused on how things are getting done. What's the actual
Mm,
process for that, and then switching that over to why things are getting done, and that
mm,
kind of discusses the fundamental aspects of why you have security in the first place. What are you trying to
mm.
protect? Is it worth protecting? And these are all questions that you ask yourself, and to make yourself have a better framework for everything that you do on the security side of things.
That's gold right there.
What's going on? Listen, I just wanted to take this really quick break to see if you guys are actually enjoying the content that's inside of this show. Because if you are, it will help out the channel a bunch if you go ahead down below, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if this conversation has truly been fire. But only if it's been fire, though. If it's been some trash, let me know in the comments. Either way, I appreciate the feedback. All right, let's get back into it.
I think sometimes we all, not even as corporations, but as individual people, sometimes we place such a high value on something that really doesn't need protection in the first place, right? And then we spend time just spinning our wheels trying to protect this one thing that's like, come on, man, like you probably could have been focusing on something completely different
Yep.
that would have added more value,
Yep.
right?
And one of the best ways of identifying that is to follow the data. So data is what you're
Mm,
usually protecting. Um, and if you know where that data is at, you're probably ahead of the game with a lot of people. And then being
mhm.
actual to protect that data, that's going to be the key thing.
Absolutely. So when you say protecting data, because some people, they get data and then information, these things get confused or they get
Hmm.
cloudy, right? In a lot of people's minds. Can you describe the difference between those two things, like data, information, or if it is, an intersecting point, and why is that important to differentiate inside of the cybersecurity space?
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of confusing because it's not just files on a computer that you're trying to protect. It can be a lot of different things, and it can be in different areas as well. So obviously, any personal information, that's really big to protect, and that's not necessarily going to be files. It can be metadata. It can be a lot of different areas. So all of it needs
Mhm.
to be protected.
Absolutely, I love it, man. When you look at like your everyday, like, well, let me
Mhm.
backtrack. When you take your daily responsibilities, right? Like when you clock
Mhm.
in and you're performing your job, how much of your job is just analyzing data compared to like taking action on that data? Like what does that look like? Like give me kind of like a breakdown of what that looks like from your perspective on a day to day.
Yeah. So I would say my day to day still involves a lot of continuous improvements into our security
Mm,
program, identifying the data that we need to protect, to implement new security controls. That
mm,
is constantly still on my day to day, because even if we have all the security controls that were great for last year, um, past our SOC 2 audits and do all that, it's always a constantly changing field. We're going to have new vendors. We're going to have new process to protect. So there's always some new data somewhere that you're going to need to protect.
absolutely. I love it, man. So real quick, I do want to open the floor for you to share maybe some thoughts to let's say 16-year-old professional, or not even a professional, he's a high school student. He thinks he wants to get into data or cybersecurity, right? What does that what advice would you give to him, right? Like if you were sitting across the table and he was like, "Man, I love what you do, William. Like, can you share with me your tips and tricks and everything else? What is some of that advice that you're going to give to that 16-year-old right now?"
So, what I like to see with hiring new talent is kind of the
Mhm,
drive, the people that will set up their own home lab environments, set up their Active Directory in those virtual servers, configure that, and not to use it because they don't need that for their home, right? But to
mhm,
try to break it, right? Seeing
mhm.
how it interacts. So there's a lot that um, a 16, 17-year old kid can do and learn with using a small computing device, right? And
Mhm.
there's plenty of open information out there as well. Um, the
Mhm.
the important thing is don't do anything dumb when you do get any of the knowledge. So be safe on that part.
Yeah, absolutely. um, it's funny because I recently listened to a show. It's called Darknet Diaries. It's another podcast, and the whole show, this episode was about this 15-year-old kid who got introduced to the dark web
Yep.
and was doing different things with like Roblox and
Yep. I just listened to that one
um,
actually.
oh
That
really?
one's good.
That was great, man. I was like, man, as a 15-year-old kid. And then what I love was the host. He was like, man, how do you explain that to your dad? Like, here's what I did, but your dad has no idea what that actually, like, how you did that, or why you did it in the first place.
Yeah.
um no, that's very interesting. Okay, so to put this back on track here, you mentioned a couple different things, right? Like for people that's trying to get into cyber, and I don't think that just applies to the 16-year-old kid, but you said what you look for is somebody that has the drive and somebody that has their own um their virtual setup at home, right? Like they come prepared at least to do this, not necessarily just for work, but in their spare time to see how these things work. Why is that important? Why is it important for those, for you to have that drive to do things maybe outside of a 9 to 5?
I, I think it's kind of the mindset that you build. So anybody
Mm-hmm.
can kind of follow or read a book. Anybody can follow a lab instructions, right? But if you actually take that and be like, "This is the information I have. What can I do with it?" It triggers something else
Mm-hmm.
that you have to do some critical thinking on. Um, and a lot of the security problems that you face requires that kind of troubleshooting, that kind of critical thinking. And it will completely change how you interact with problems that you come across.
It's very true. Coming back to that mindset side of
Mm,
things, right? Having a security mindset. Um, that's awesome, man. So with that, here's what I want to do, because I know overall, I appreciate the fact that one, you were coming on here for this call and just to kind of dive into some of these different pieces. But one of the things I always like to share is the relationship, and we talked a little bit about this already, but the relationship between security teams and the rest of the organization,
hmm
right? What advice would you give to maybe, different CISOs or security, VPs, directors who don't really have a lot of synergy with the rest of the organization, right? Like maybe they feel as though their teams are kind of isolated, and because of that, the users feel like they're just the parents telling them what to do, like what they can and can't
hmm
do. What would be your advice to hopefully change that narrative, right? To help them
Yeah,
maybe implement programs and things that allows the rest of the organization to really talk to the security teams and find out why maybe some of these permissions are in
exactly.
place.
So I would say you have to listen. You have to listen to your users. You have to understand exactly what they're doing, what their current process is, what their current
Hmm.
needs are, and then you're going to have to balance that with the needs of the company overall. Um, so you don't want to make it so complicated that they can't get any work done, but you don't want it to make it so insecure that they can't get any work done when the whole company's down because it has ransomware, right? So
Right.
there's obviously a balancing act, and that goes back to figuring out your data, figuring out how you want to secure it, um, how it needs to be secured, right? And implementing that in a way that makes sense for your organization, because everything's going to be pretty unique. There's not a lot of companies that do exactly the same thing. So tailoring those controls to what you need is going to be key.
Absolutely. Well, there you have it, folks. Some of the incredible advice and key takeaways that you can take away from our guy, Mr. William Dodgen. I think he's again a wealth of knowledge, wealth of information. I love learning from him, to be honest. When we anytime we get together down back in Kansas City, I love being able to pick his brain about different stuff as well. So, William, I want to thank you again for coming on the show, but I want you to also let people know how can they find you. What's the best way to get a hold of William? Is it on social media, by email? Let us know.
I should be on LinkedIn somewhere. Sorry, I don't have
Yeah.
too much of a social presence, but you could probably find me.
Is that by design?
Someone's design, yeah.
Yep. Nothing wrong with that. Well, if you do need William, follow him on LinkedIn. I am connected with William on LinkedIn, so I know you're there. So I appreciate you again, William, coming out, man, and sharing some different details on the topic. And guys, thank you again for tuning in to another show in the Simply Secure podcast. And I will see you again on the next one.
So what do you think? Was that helpful? There's incredible conversations just like this one all throughout this channel. The links on the screen, the videos that you'll see is actually other videos that's very similar to some of the conversations that I had right here with this guest. So feel free to go ahead and binge watch some of these incredible conversations with other cybersecurity leaders within the space. And if you found value, feel free to go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hit the like button, because it helps YouTube push this content and this channel to other people in the industry just like you. And obviously, those are the people that I'm trying to reach. So I appreciate you and look forward to seeing you again on the next one. Deuces.